Hi, Yidlach, here to record today's rambam for the 6th of Tevis. This is going to be chapter 9 on the Rambam's Mishnah Torah and the Laws of Oaths. Halacha 1. Hatoveya edav lahayid lo edo shizchayev hanisba beiduson levad eliten soveya zeh mamon hamitaltel. If someone comes and says, hey, I lent this guy some money, or this guy owes me some money, please come testify. Kafir beiduson v'nishbo, and the potential witness takes an oath and denies what the plaintiff is asking him to say, but he did actually know it. Whether the oath was in or out of the court. These guys have taken a false oath and they are obligated. Because they cause a lack of money. That seems to be a critical factor of a lot of these laws, is if you cause someone to lose. If there was a loss of money caused by this oath, and here they clearly was, because they testified that Shimon owed him $50, he would have got it, and they didn't. And so too, if rather than the witness taking the oath, the plaintiff, so to speak, administered them the oath, or asked them to testify under the severity of an oath, Velo anu amen akar shavuos, and they also didn't even answer amen to what he said. We learned earlier that sometimes answering amen can be considered as a person taking on a certain oath. Kaven shekafru hare elo chayvin, but just since they denied it under the severity of the oath that the plaintiff had administered to them, they are obligated for taking on this type of false testimony oath. And that's as long as what I said just now. This last scenario happened in Beis Din. If the witness himself takes the oath, it doesn't matter whether he's in and out of Beis Din. But if he's only responding to the plaintiff saying to him, hey, with the severity of an oath, I want you to testify to A, B, and C, and he denies, that only obligates him if that happened in Beis Din. All right, halacha beis. Eina edim chayvim b'shvuos ha'erus ad shekafar b'erus Beis Din. A critical part to being obligated in this is that they deny the oath the actual denial has to take place in Beis Din. Whether the oath itself took place in or out of Beis Din, the actual denial has to happen in Beis Din. Hakfir Beis Din bilvad. How do you know that the denial has to happen in Beis Din? Shnemar im lo yagid v'nasa avoinoi. Hope I'm pronouncing that second word right. Makom sheyagid v'yoyo hu she'im lo yagid sham yischayv. It says, the pasuk says, and if you don't testify, you'll bear his sin. Implied is that it's the place where testimony happens. So where does testimony happen? It's in Beis Din. So if the denial occurs in Beis Din, if the not speaking happens in Beis Din, then the person is obligated. Halakha Gimel. Tavan be'edu she'enu mechayev mamon. If it's the reverse, it's the defendant asking these people to testify that he doesn't owe money, or be'edos karkaos, or testimony about land, or abdin ushtaros, or land or land servants or documents. And he denies, then, and he swears to his denial, he's not obligated. All right, so the latter three, the land, the servants, and the documents, land's excluded scripturally. Servants are compared to land scripturally, so they're both out. And a document doesn't have any actual money. It's not worth money. It just represents a certain value, but it itself isn't worth money. So these three are all out. But how about oh, I'm sorry. I mistranslated the opening phrase. If the person wants him to testify about something that doesn't concern money, or it concerns land, slaves, or documents, which are all excluded, and the first case there's no money, and he takes an oath to that effect, then he's not obligated. She'enan chayvin ela kafiras and edos umamun shedoma lifkarun shumas yad agazo aveda shepachon akasu beparasha shehein metalplin sheguf umamun uksheeru leze yiten ze. Because a person's not obligated unless he denies um, something worth money, unless it's something that's to some degree similar to a deposit that's left, or someone stole something, or misappropriated something, or lost something. Make sure I didn't miss anything there. Has to resemble an entrusted object, a deposit, a robbery, a lost object. What is this? This is movable property which has value. And were they to testify, there would be a financial obligation. So land is not movable, can't be entrusted to someone. Scripture compares servants to land, so they're out. The document itself isn't worth any money, or a claim that just doesn't involve money. All these are not shark to being obligated in an oath, because there's no portable financial obligation. Halakha Dalid, v'chein hamasbi edi knas v'kafru b'turin mishvus edus. If it was just a case of a fine, and he asked him to come to court to testify about a fine, and the guy denied, he is also not culpable. Because financial penalty he had in his own, the witness had in his, the defendant has in his own power to knock that money out. Because if a person admits, according to Torah, if a person admits to a financial penalty, a fine, he doesn't have to pay. So the person could have gotten himself off the hook. So that this other gentleman should come and testify on behalf of the plaintiff that so-and-so owes the fine, it wasn't his testimony that was the critical variable in causing money to be exchanged, because the other person could also cause the money not to be exchanged by just admitting. So this person also isn't obligated an oath. And even if the witnesses should come later, chivu ze be'edusan levada, ela edusan im kafira hanisba hi amachayvin oisai. So even if the witnesses come later, he still wouldn't have had to pay. Instead, it's the critical variable is their testimony along with the denial of the defendant that made him liable. So and if he would admit, their testimony would be useless. So if he takes an oath and denies, he's putter. It has to be a case where his testimony is the single lone variable that would cause financial obligation or cause money to move somewhere or another. And here, that's not necessarily the case. This guy could always admit. Halacha hey. Mashbiachim anish tarvoyu v'sa'idu li sheyesh li biad ploni tashlume kafel. How about a guy says, it seems to be saying that these guys asking him to testify, someone stole me. Yep, he says, Shimon tells the witnesses, I want you to testify under the power of an oath that Levi owes me double, V'tushli Ambar Chamisha, or 4 or 5, which are different financial penalties. There's a penalty for theft of, theft's like sneaking in theft, burglary, not armed robbery, which is interesting. There's a lot to say about that, but now is not the place. Or also, if a person stole a sheep or an ox and then either shecked it or sold it, there's a big penalty. There's a 4 or 5 time penalty. 4 for a sheep, 5 for an ox. Also, a lot of interesting discussion there. But in any of those cases where these are fines, v'kafru chayven b'shvuos edus. Here we say he is obligated. Let's see why. Mipnei hakaren shehu mamon lo mipnei hakafol shehu kanas. Because included in the claim he stole and checked it is along with the financial penalty is the principal amount of whatever the object was worth that he stole, and that money will be returned to the plaintiff based on this testimony. So that makes this a situation where it will be a false oath. וכן אם השביען שיעדו לו שאנס פלוני או פיתה ביתו וכפרו חייבים בשבועס העדוס, והנה הבו שלו גם שאם הודה בהן, הניפה משלם לא מפני הקנס וכן כל יץ וזה. And so too, any other similar case, for example, no one should know these things. A father comes and says, please testify that so-and-so raped my daughter, so-and-so seduced my daughter. There's a number of payments that happen there. Many of them are principal payments, but there is also a penalty, a fine mixed in. So since his testimony also obligates the criminal for the principal financial amounts, then if he were to deny under oath, it would also be a situation of a false oath, and he would be obligated. All right, halacha vav. ואין העדים חייבים בשבועס העדוס עד שיכפרו וישבו אחר תביעס בעל דין עצמו או שלוחו, אבל אם קדמו ונשבוי קודם שתזוויים פטורין משבועס העדוס. All right, so we see that the order here is also very important. What's the order that has to happen? They have to deny and then take an oath that either the plaintiff or the agent of the plaintiff demanded. But if they take the oath first before any demand is made, they're not liable. It's very interesting. Not sure exactly how that's going to work, but we see the order is important. It has to be a demand and then a denial. Let's do one more halacha here. So halacha zayin ketzad. How does it work? Rawa deveo v'holech achrehen. Amru lo lama ata ba achrenu. So they saw the plaintiff who was coming after them. They said to him, "Why are you following us?" And they say, "Why are you following us? We're taking an oath that we don't have any testimony in regards to you. What are you after us for?" Because he didn't demand anything, the plaintiff. They jumped the gun and swore first. So too, if the defendant administered an oath to them that if they knew testimony involving the plaintiff, they should come and testify and deny knowledge of the matter. Another case would be, let's try this one more time, that if the defendant gave them an oath that if they knew testimony about the plaintiff, they should come and testify, and they deny about it, they're not on the hook for taking a false oath unless the plaintiff causes them to take the oath. So there's some very critical, the pieces of the puzzle have to come together in the right order and from the right people and properly. Still trying to put it together a little bit here. And we don't even have to say if he gave them an oath that they should come and testify that so-and-so owes the money and they deny, they're not liable. Because it has to be the plaintiff himself demanding and causing them to take this oath. And so too, if the oath precedes the testimony, they would also not be obligated, because the pasuk says, and he heard the voice of an oath when he was a witness. So we can see from the verse that testimony came before the oath and not the oath for the testimony. All right, let's try to put this together here. 1 second. Okay, we're back. Hope we're back. The last part of halacha zayin, it wasn't that the oath had to precede the testimony. It was that the witnesses had to have the knowledge before the oath was given. They had to have seen the loan happen. They had to have seen whatever was a critical event happen. They had to have the awareness before the oath was given. And that's how we can see from the pasuk Whether the actual oath or the testimony came out first, maybe, maybe not, we haven't said. But it seems to be, it has to be in a situation where the oath and the denial are given in such a way that the denial at that exact second caused loss of money under oath. So if the witnesses jump the gun and deny, there's no claim yet, so it's not causing a loss of money. If the defendant tells them to come to court, his words, we need the gentleman who himself is claiming the money to come and demand this of him. He's not really, even if the defendant could cause himself a loss of money, for sure, if these witnesses come, but he's not. Has to be the gentleman himself who's trying to obtain the money, asking the witnesses to take this oath. Has to be the person who wants the money and to some degree empowered to make these witnesses speak, bring them to court. It has to be his interests that are being represented under oath and denied. And if the other gentleman's, to some degree he's representing his interests, but he's not really representing his interests because the other person hasn't claimed yet. It has to be fully represented to the point where the person is claiming. And it can't be that they're given an oath before they know anything, before even they saw the loan go down, because then what would they really be denying? They're not denying something they know yet. All right, hold here one. All right, let's do halacha ches here. Take a short break. Ketzad mashbiyan ani alechem she'tedun li edus shetavo v'si'idu. I'm sorry, us'iduni v'amru amen. V'yadol edus acher kain tvam lahed v'chafru bo related to tworin shuas edus. Another case is, so we're going to give some examples now. Here's a case of that the oath was given before they knew any testimony. The potential plaintiff, the future plaintiff, comes and says to them, I'm giving you an oath that if you should later know testimony about me that will help me make money, that you should come and testify. And the witnesses answer, Amen. For whatever should happen in the future will come. Which, Amen, can obligate a person sometimes. And then later they did see something, and then he comes and demands they testify. The previous oath was not enough to make them obligated for a false oath, because it was out of order. They did not have the knowledge of the testimony at the time the oath was given. Halacha tes, eina idim chayvim b'shvuos ha'edus ad she'yaychad osam atavei v'yasbiyim o yishvau. They're not obligated until the plaintiff singles them out and gives them the oath. Ketzad, how does it work? Amad b'beis ha'knesses v'amar masbiyan ani kol mi sheyeda li edus sheyavu v'yayid li v'anu kulam amen. For example, the plaintiff stands up in shul and he says, I'm administering an oath to anybody who knows testimony about me that they should come and testify, and everybody answers Amen. Ve'eda v'klalan, and the witnesses are amidst the group. V'achakak tavo edav, and afterward he demands their testimony. V'chafrabo, and they deny. They are not obligated for a false oath because he didn't single them out. He talked to the whole shul. He needs to really single out whoever it is, Reuven and Shimon, and address them directly, not a whole congregation that they're in the midst of. Well, it's a little bit of a fine line. It's a little bit different. If instead he says, I'm administering oath to everybody standing here that if they know testimony that they should come and testify, and then if they were present amongst the group and they acknowledged and they denied knowledge, they are liable because he singled them out. Let's see why this language singles them out a little more. For what he just said, anyone who knows. Now he said, all those standing here. So the note here says, although he spoke to the group as a whole, the oath was still directed to each of the persons individually. So the first time he personally was addressing a group, he addressed the entire group, and second time also there's a group of people standing in front of him, but his statement was directed to each person individually. He said, I'm administering an oath to all those standing here. So that statement falls on each and every individual standing there. So it did hit Reuven and Shimon directly. It doesn't have to be to the exclusion of others, but it has to be a direct demand, and this does demand of them directly, all those standing here, that's you and you, particularly you and you, as opposed to everyone else, and that they should come testify. All right, halacha yud. V'chein amar le'edim bo v'yidu li sheyesh li mana b'yad ploni v'achar kach amar b'beis knesses v'shbiya kol mi sheyeda lo edus yavo v'yayid v'lo v'av v'lo ha'idu hari le'chayvin shahari tavo t'chila. So too, if originally the demand was made in the proper way, but then later he made a public address in shul in a non-obligatory way, and then afterwards the witnesses came, denied under oath, that they would be obligated because they were demanded of properly in the first place. V'hu shiyu sham b'beis knesses v'yu sham b'beis din. Doesn't matter whether it's beis knesses or beis din. Hold on one second. One moment, please. This last part was a little more sensitive than how we said it. So what happened was he addressed them properly in the beginning, and then in the shul he made a public demand, and they didn't come forward. And the Rambam saying they're already obligated because this is only true if there's a beis din within the shul. But if there's no beis din within the shul, then they're not obligated till they are in a beis din and answer amen. But until that point, they're not liable. Halacha Yud Aleph. Echad hamashbiya eda b'shvuah u'sha'amad lehen mitzava ani alechem b'shvuah u'serchem ani b'shvuah hari elu chayvin v'hu sheyeshbiyim b'shem u'v'chlini k'mo shevi'arnu. So how about a case where the witness administers an oath, where the plaintiff administers to the witnesses an oath and says, I'm commanding you with an oath, I'm binding you with an oath. They're liable if the oath contained either God's name or one of the terms used to describe him. So the critical notion there is if he says to him, Mitzava ani alechem b'shvuah, I'm commanding on you with the power of b'shvuah, or sorchem ani b'shvuah, which is I'm binding you with the power of shavuos. They're both obligated. Halacha Yud Beis. Ve'ein ha'edim chayvim ad sheyishbiyim v'lo she'em akirin iso. The witnesses will never be obligated until the oath is given to them in a language that they understand. Halacha Yud Gimel. Second, getting a little hot over here. Halacha Yud Gimel. Hine l'madata she'ein ha'edim chayvim b'shvuos ha'edus ela al pi So for them to be obligated, you need 10 things. That the plaintiff demands, that there's money involved, that's movable money, and that their testimony alone could obligate the defendant. And they deny after the plaintiff demands, and the denial happens in beis din. And the oath is given either with Hashem's name or a term used to describe him. They have to have knowledge of the testimony before the oath. They have to be singled out, even if it's amidst a group, when he's demanding of them. And it has to be oath given in a language they know. So those are the 10 qualities a person needs to be able to, God forbid, be obligated for a false oath. Anytime we say he's pater from a testimonial oath, he is. Anytime we say he's not obligated for taking a false oath regarding testimony, he is still obligated for taking just a stamazoi false oath of expression, because either way they lied. If they lied, they still are obligated for one of the 4 oaths. The 4 oaths are testimony, past, present, and future, a deposit, and the other one eludes me right now. Oh, and just a nonsense oath, I think. I'm not sure. I have to check that. Wish I could remember all the types of oaths. If he takes an oath, he won't benefit from someone. I'm sorry. These types of oaths. Okay, but the false oath, I mean, still at the end of the day, the guy lied. So a lot of times when he's off the hook for the other 3, he's still on the hook for this one. Sorry for the little mix-up there, and still, we should all check up what the four oaths are. Make sure we have those properly. V'hu shenishbo she'ana amen imashbiu achar shari nishbo al shecher. This would be true that they took an oath, or they answered amen if someone else gave them the oath, because they did lie. Aval hamachuya b'shvuas ha'edus afal pi shehu nishba al sheker v'afal pi shehu mezid eino chayv mashum shvuas bitoy elo mashum shvuas ha'edus bilvad. This is interesting. But if someone's liable for shvuas edus, he's only liable for the shvuas edus, even though he did take a false oath, and even though he didn't intentionally. Let's see why he's off the hook for the other one. Because the verse exempts shvuas edus from shvuas bitoy. Chayav mezid ba b'shogi b'karban, to teach you a special lesson that mezid, that unintentional and intentional are equally obligated. Lo b'malchus, and that even the intentional sinner shouldn't. They both have the unintentional penalty of bringing an offering. Usually, someone who sins on purpose isn't entitled to bring an offering. They can't get atonement that way. Has to do tshuva or suffer lashes. Here the Torah singles him out, says he doesn't suffer any lashes. Shnemar la'achas mehena, because the verse says for one of these. Umin echad mimini shvuas atzim mechayev hanishba. So it means a person can be only obligated for one type of oath. Meaning ad sheyiyah chayv bedin shvuas edus v'din shvuas bitoy. So a person who takes a false oath is liable for one type of oath, but not two. We don't hire them for both, because the verse says for one of these. It says specifically for one of these, and the verse is talking. These two, a person can be only obligated for one. That seemingly doesn't apply to the other two oaths, that a person could be obligated for more than one at a time. All right, halacha tes. Mashbiya ani alechem im lo savu v'seiru li sheyesh li biyad ploni b'karun v'shumas yad gazo v'veda shavuos she'ein ani yudin l'chai edus ein chayven ela achas shu she'ein ani yudin l'chai edus sheyesh l'chai biyad ploni b'karun v'shumas yad gazo v'veda chayven al achas v'achas. Okay, so we're going to itemize here. So if the plaintiff comes and says, take an oath that so-and-so has an entrusted object, a deposit, stolen property, or a lost object, and they say, we don't know, and they deny, then they're only on the hook for one carbon. They only denied once. But if they say that taking an oath, we don't know any testimony concerning an entrusted object, a financial deposit, stolen property, and a lost object, etc., 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 since they itemize each thing, then they're liable for each statement and have to bring a sacrifice for each utterance because they itemized it. So the false oath hit every one of those words, and it's the same type of oath. It's not the exclusion we had last time, where it was two types. Here it's the same type of false testimony, but they falsely testified about four different things that they personally itemized. Whether the plaintiff itemizes them isn't going to be a critical factor, because they could just deny it all, and then it's just one denial. Or if they deny each thing individually, then it's four denials, or however many denials it is, and they have to bring an offering for each one. Tes Zion. Mashbiyan ani elechem im lo savu v'seiru li sheyesh li biyad ploni chitim v'sorim v'chusmin shavuos she'ein anu yodim l'cha edus ein chayvim el achas shavuos she'ein anu yodim l'cha edus sheyesh l'cha biyad ploni chitim v'sorim v'chusmin chayvim el chalachim achas. So too, if it was the plaintiff was claiming wheat, barley, and buckwheat, and they said we don't know anything, it's one. And if they said no to wheat, no to barley, no to buckwheat, then they owe for all three. I'm not sure what the chiddush would be there. Maybe you would think that since wheat, barley, and buckwheat are very, very similar, that they're really one thing, and even if you itemize them, it would still considered one denial because they're also very similar wheat food items. But no, we see even so, they are counted as separate statements, and he would be liable for each one. Unlike the previous halacha, where it's a big difference between an entrusted object, stolen property, or lost object. But even so, even if the things are somewhat similar and he itemizes them, he's on the hook for each one. Yud Zayin v'chein in tavo oisen rabim la'ed lehem v'amu shavuos she'ein anirin lachem edus ein chayven el achas lo lacha v'lo lacha v'lo lacha hayven al chalachs v'achas kederek shebarnu shus b'karun. So too, if it's a number of plaintiffs claiming from them, If the witnesses respond, we don't know nothing about none of you, that's one denial, and they're on the hook for only one carbon. But if they say, we don't know anything about you, and you, and itemize the people the same way itemizing the items obligates them for more than one oath, itemizing the people the same, and they'd have to bring a carbon for each person that they itemize. Yudches hanishva lechavero shehu yidei lo edus v'nimsa she'eno yidei lo edus hariza patur. If the guy gives his buddy an oath that he knows something about it, and it turns out the guy really doesn't know, he's patur. Ve'ein kan lo shavuos edus v'lo shavuos bitoy minei shavuos bitoy eno el b'davar sheyesh bo lav v'hein. And here there's no concept of shavuos edus or shavuos bitoy. How is that? Because for it to be a shavuos bitoy, it has to have a positive and negative dimension. If he says, I'm taking an oath, I don't know any testimony about you, that's not a shavuos bitoy, it's shavuos edus. And since the negative dimension and the positive dimension, taking oath that one knows testimony, is also not shavuos bitoy. All right, Yudches is going to need a little further elaboration, at least on my side, on my part. There needs to be a negative and positive dimension to shavuos bitoy, and for whatever reason, when this person denies the oath and it turns out he really didn't know anything, that does not have both positive and negative dimensions, so he's not high for anything. Last halacha, Yud-tes, davar baro she'anishba lechavero she'ed lu v'hu lo eid, or she'lo ha'ed lo v'hu eid, hari zachayv mishum shavuos bitoy ve'ein kan shavuos edus klal. How about in a case where a person takes an oath that he says so-and-so did testify for me or so-so didn't testify for me, then it's just a shavuos bitoy and shavuos edus. There's no actual testimony, it's just a person saying something about what did or didn't happen. Just one final note here on the previous halacha, Yud Ches. Since the negative aspect, if the person were to say, I'm taking an oath that I don't know any testimony concerning you, that's not considered shavuos bitoy. It's considered shavuos edus. So since the negative aspect cannot be considered shavuos bitoy, that wipes out the potential for so then the positive aspect, maybe it could or it couldn't, but it doesn't matter because the negative aspect doesn't exist, so this person is not chayav for shavuos bitoy. That finishes chapter 9, end of Rambam for today. Everyone should have a great day.